What if the voice that once stopped a nation was actually a shield for a man who felt he didn't even belong on this planet? This is a breaking report on Jonathan, but the man surfacing in the headlines this week is someone the public barely recognizes. We are tracking a massive development in the career of the tenor who became an overnight sensation over a decade ago. For years, critics wondered if he would fade into the archives of talent show history, but this week, the narrative has shifted completely. Has officially broken his silence with the announcement of his 2026 project, Speaking to You, and the lead single All of Me. But looking past the press releases, there is a sense that something much deeper is happening behind the curtain. Our sources indicate that this isn't just a routine album cycle, it's a total rebranding of a human soul. The industry is buzzing about the two era, which seems to have discarded the formal, stiff persona of his youth for something far more visceral. This week's release has triggered a wave of speculation regarding his vocal health and his future in the elite opera circles. While the high notes are still there, the delivery has changed. It's grittier, more personal, and carries a weight that wasn't present during his teenage years. This transition has left many wondering what exactly happened during his period of semi-seclusion. Was he being held back by contractual obligations, or was he simply waiting for the right moment to reclaim his narrative? As we look at the data from the last few days, the engagement levels on his new content are skyrocketing, suggesting that the voice of a generation is successfully courting a whole new demographic that cares more about the man than the tuxedo. But as the spotlight intensifies, so do the questions about the cost of this comeback. Because while the music sounds triumphant, the whispers from within his inner circle suggest that the journey to this week's launch was paved with internal conflict that almost saw him walk away from the microphone forever. But that was only the beginning of the revelations surfacing this week. While fans are celebrating the music, a deeper investigation into recent history reveals a man who spent years fighting a battle he didn't even have a name for until very recently. The most shocking development in the files involves the of his entire public persona. For over a decade, Jonathan was often described by the media as shy, eccentric, or even robotic in interviews. However, we can now report that these weren't personality quirks, but symptoms of a profound internal struggle. Following his autism diagnosis, Jonathan has spent this week being incredibly vocal about how this realization saved him from a dark path. In the past, he's hinted at moments where he nearly himself, using indirect language to describe a period where the pressure of fame became a literal threat to his existence. He's admitted to being in a black hole where the expectations of the world felt like a physical weight he couldn't lift. This week, he's finally shedding the mask. He's explained to fans that his perceived coldness in early years was actually intense sensory overload. Imagine being a teenager with heightened sensitivities being thrust onto the world's loudest stages. It's a miracle he survived the transition at all. By coming forward with these details now, in 2026, he's challenging the industry's treatment of neurodivergent artists. But the dark period he's referring to involved more than just social anxiety. There were whispers of him struggling with deep-seated issues that often follow child stars into adulthood, accusations of mismanagement, and the feeling of being a cash cow for labels that didn't care about his mental well-being. This week's behind-the-scenes look proves that he's finally taking the reins of his own health. He isn't just singing better, he's breathing easier. However, many are asking who exactly helped him navigate this minefield, as it's become clear he wasn't doing it alone. And that brings us to the woman who has been his secret pillar for the last 4 years. Behind every great comeback is a hidden force, and for Jonathan, that force is a woman he's managed to keep out of the tabloid crosshairs. Until now. As we dig into the personal life of the tenor this week, the focus has shifted to his private life, specifically his 2022 marriage. For a long time, the public assumed Jonathan was a solitary figure, but the reality is much more cinematic. His wife has quietly become the most influential person in his professional circle. Sources close to the singer suggest that she has been the gatekeeper of his peace, managing his schedule to avoid the sensory triggers that previously led to his episodes or retreats from public life. This week, as he prepares for a 2026 tour, her role has become even more critical. They've built a lifestyle that prioritizes his stability over raw profit, a move that has reportedly frustrated some old-school promoters who wanted him on a grueling, global itinerary. This secret marriage has provided the foundation for the confidence we're seeing in his latest videos. It's a narrative of redemption. He went from a boy who felt he was unlovable and broke into a man with a solid domestic life. However, this privacy hasn't stopped the speculation. Some corners of the internet have questioned why he kept her so hidden, with rumors suggesting he feared a backlash from fans, or that his single status was a marketing requirement from his former management. But this week, Jonathan is making it clear. His personal life is no longer up for negotiation. He is protecting the very thing that kept him grounded when the fame machine tried to chew him up. But even with this newfound support, the 2026 launch has been marred by a recent tragedy that left the singer's household in mourning, a loss that nearly caused the cancellation of his current media blitz. Even with a new album and a supportive marriage, a devastating loss this week has reminded fans that Jonathan is currently walking a very thin emotional line. Reporting from the emotional of Jonathan's life, we've learned that the recording sessions for Speaking to You were nearly derailed by a profound personal tragedy. For those who follow him closely, you know that Jonathan's cats, Polly and Pandora, weren't just pets. They were his primary emotional support system during his most isolated years. This week, Jonathan opened up about their passing, and the grief has been palpable. For a neurodivergent individual, the loss of a routine-based companion can be catastrophic. He's described the silence in his home as deafening, and it's a grief that has bled directly into his vocal takes. If you listen to the lower registers of his new tracks, there is a haunting quality that wasn't there before. He's admitted that there were days this week where he couldn't even look at a microphone. The behind-the-scenes footage from his studio shows a man who is clearly processing a significant ending of his old life. This loss has triggered a wave of empathy from fans, but it's also raised concerns about his resilience. Can he handle a high-pressure tour while dealing with this level of personal mourning? Some insiders are worried that he's pushing himself too hard to meet 2026 deadlines, using the music as a distraction rather than allowing himself to truly heal. It's a delicate balance, and the raw emotion he's displaying has made this album cycle the most human one of his career. But while some are moved by his sorrow, a storm is brewing in the classical music world over the way he's choosing to express that pain. A civil war is breaking out in the comments sections of his latest videos, as traditionalists accuse Jonathan of selling out his operatic gift for a more commercial sound. The news surrounding his 2026 creative direction isn't all positive. As we analyze the feedback from his recent performances, a clear divide is emerging. The purists who fell in love with his style delivery are expressing significant accusations that he is abandoning his classical training. They're pointing to his new, more pop-infused arrangements as evidence that he's chasing chart success over artistic integrity. Rumors have even surfaced about a disagreement between Jonathan and his former vocal coaches, who reportedly wanted him to stay in the rigid world of opera. But Jonathan's response this week has been defiant. He's made it clear that he no longer wants to be a museum piece. This conflict highlights the untold story of the classical music industry, the immense pressure put on young prodigies to never change, never experiment, and never grow. Jonathan is essentially exposing the limitations of that world. He's arguing that his voice is a tool for joy, not a slave to tradition. This week, he's been seen collaborating with artists outside the classical genre, further fueling speculation that he's moving toward a crossover sound that could alienate his original base. Is he risking his career by being this bold? Or is he finally tapping into a market that the classical world is too snobbish to acknowledge? The stakes are incredibly high, as the success of this 2026 tour depends on whether his old fans will follow him into this new, uncharted territory. But regardless of the musical debate, one thing is undeniable. The man we see on screen today is physically and mentally a different person than the one we knew. As we conclude this week's report, the most jarring update isn't about the music or the marriage, it's the unrecognizable transformation of Jonathan's spirit. Looking at the latest footage from this week, the physical and mental evolution of Jonathan is the real story. Gone is the slouching, nervous boy who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. In his place is a man who stands tall, makes direct eye contact with the camera, and speaks with a clarity that was once absent. This physical transformation has been a long time coming. He's navigated years of public scrutiny regarding his weight and appearance, but in 2026, he seems to have reached a state of radical self-acceptance. He's no longer trying to hide his body or his personality to fit a certain image. He's revealed that his journey involved levels of difficulty, dealing with online trolls and industry experts who told him he didn't have the look of a leading man. He's proven them all wrong. The shocking truth isn't that he changed, it's that he survived the attempt to change him. This week's behind-the-scenes updates show a man who is finally revealed in the best way possible, completely authentic. He's a husband, a neurodivergent advocate, and a survivor of the child star machine. As he prepares to launch Speaking to You on March 27, he's leaving us with a thought-provoking question. Is the world ready to listen to a man who has finally found his own voice? Or do we only want the version of him that we created? One thing is certain, the real Jonathan has arrived, and he's not going back into the shadows.